in his Yoga Sutras. So, however, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras deal with just Ashtanga Yoga, one particular type of yoga, whereas there are other types of yogas known as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, knowledge, and then we have Bhakti Yoga, devotional service. So, what is yoga? Yoga basically means to connect. This is what it means. Yoga is only practiced by somebody who understands that they are spiritual. Right? Without that, you can do yoga asanas, you may do pranayama, it's just physical exercise. That a person, when to actually practice yoga, one has to understand that one is spirit soul, one is not just this material body. One has to have a consciousness that is more than just based on this body, that we have a spirit soul, and wanting to realize the self, wanting to understand who God is, what is the nature of this world, wanting to understand the purpose of life, and wanting to ultimately, actually, people who practice yoga, they are ultimately interested in liberation. They are ultimately interested in liberation from the cycle of birth and death. That there is a cycle of birth and death which is causing us to be born again. It is causing us to be born again, and we may be born as a male, as a female, as an animal, as a plant, as a demigod. We could be born in many things. But a person who actually is interested in yoga is interested in coming out of this cycle because he understands that there's something better. That there is something better, and he doesn't want to go through this. He doesn't want to be subject. This is the only person who will actually practice yoga with some seriousness. Everybody else will be interested in dabbling in some way, shape, or form in different species of life, in different occupations of this material world. They will not be interested to take up spiritual practice seriously unless they feel the need for what in Vedic terms salvation refers to moksha. Moksha meaning liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Meaning coming out of a situation of that which is temporary into that which is eternal. Why to move from that which is temporary to that which is eternal? Because we are eternal, we are not temporary. Us, we, who we actually are, we are spirit souls. And as spirit souls, we are eternal, we're not temporary. The body, the pleasures that we experience in this world, even the different life forms, wealth, fame, beauty, this is all ephemeral. And these ephemeral pleasures do not give satisfaction to the spirit soul because the spirit soul is eternal. Therefore, yoga. Therefore, we need to practice yoga. Now, Bhagavad Gita is called Yoga Shastra because Krishna comparatively analyzes the different processes of yoga and finally culminates it in devotional service, Bhakti Yoga. This is the subject matter of Bhagavad Gita. This is because ultimately Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Bhagavan, Krishna, God himself, to Arjuna, who is actually his devotee. Arjuna was not he was not somebody like an Ashtanga yogi. He wasn't a sage meditating in the forest. He was a family man. He had worldly duties. He had his occupations. But more than anything else, he was very intimately related with Krishna. He was very intimately related with the Supreme Lord as a devotee. So the Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between the devotee and God. And the subject matter is devotional service. But Krishna systematically presents and establishes devotional service as the best for any person and as something that is very easy to practice and gives the highest bliss. So now, after establishing what is transcendental knowledge in the previous chapter, chapter 4, in chapter 5, Krishna speaks of how a person in knowledge, how do they act? How do they behave? So in this chapter, Krishna explains the effects of a person in transcendental knowledge. That is, the effects of what happens when a person actually gains knowledge. And so, therefore, if you look at this verse, okay. Yes. So text. So in text 20, so you can see here, a person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who already knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. Next verse, he gives more and more characteristics to this. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always entranced, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So a person who is in knowledge is acting on that platform, and when he acts on that platform, these are the things that he experiences. Even the following verse also says the same thing. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So, the main point that Krishna drives here is that a person who is in knowledge, he has been transformed. That knowledge is transformative. It is not just theoretical knowledge. It is not something you just know. It is something that you act upon. And so when you have knowledge and you have to act upon it, then how are you going to act upon it? So that's where we lead to the next chapter known as Dhyana Yoga, meaning that the person who is in knowledge, he has now detached himself from the temporary pleasures of the world, which means what? When he means he detached himself, it means he has to cultivate some renunciation. People in it's not very hard to understand that, say, people talk about controlling their mind. One of the easiest ways to control your mind is to take yourself out of the situation that is agitating your mind, that is causing you to become subject to the demands of the mind, and then going through something that you know is not beneficial for you. So that means one has to develop some renunciation. Okay, so that's why you lead to the next chapter, which is called Dhyana Yoga, where one meditates, and that Krishna explains the benefits of such kind of meditation. And one of the fundamental characteristics of that kind of meditation is one has to be renounced. How can you meditate? How can you concentrate on something if you're distracted? To concentrate and not be distracted means that one has to pull oneself from the temptations that are causing distraction. So, now ultimately, we have to remember that while individual yoga processes emphasize these particular aspects, right? For instance, Jnana Yoga emphasizes the aspect of gaining knowledge, emphasizes the aspect of observing the world and gaining knowledge. You have to gain knowledge. You have to observe. By observing, you will understand that you are eternal, that you are not temporary. By observing, you will understand that even though you may gain some of these temporary pleasures, ultimately, when the body is destroyed, all those pleasures come to an end. We may earn $1 billion, but when the body is finished, the pleasure that we derived from the $1 billion is also gone with that body. And the body is sure to be destroyed. Why? Because that which is created will be, that which has a beginning has an end. Why don't we have an end? Because we are spirit souls. we are eternal. We don't have a beginning. That's one of the things Krishna explains. So gaining this knowledge, there's a lot of emphasis on understanding this knowledge in Jnana Yoga. But Jnana Yoga, it has to lead towards, ultimately it has to lead towards devotional service, bhakti. And that's how Krishna explains. He explains the progression of yoga towards bhakti as to how devotional service, right? When we chant Hare Krishna, when we practice Krishna consciousness, we accept and utilize all these elements of these different yogas to ultimately achieve perfection. Now, the other processes of yoga are not as beneficial as bhakti yoga, as devotional service, because they only contain one or the other advantages of these different processes of yoga. And because they don't contain all the advantages, they are harder to practice. They're just harder to practice. For instance, one may develop jnana, one may develop knowledge, but if you don't cultivate renunciation to put that knowledge into practice, then that knowledge just remains as dry theoretical knowledge. We may know we're spirit soul. Oh yeah, I know I'm spirit soul. I know I'm not this body. But then you don't act on that platform. I mean, you don't act on that platform, you don't really derive much benefit. So you have to come to that platform of renunciation. And in Jnana Yoga, the object of meditation, until it's determined what the object of meditation is, one is still kind of groping. Like for instance, in Dhyana Yoga, the next chapter, Krishna describes that one should not meditate on something just vague, just some energy, some light, some just meditate on the universe. There's no vagueness. In Dhyana Yoga, Krishna explains that the object of meditation is the Paramatma situated within one's heart. It is the Supreme Lord who is situated, the super soul who is situated in each and everything, who is sustaining everything and who is within our hearts. Until a person in Jnana Yoga comes to that conclusion that yes, I have to be meditating on the super soul, he can be meditating on so many other things and he will not achieve any benefit. And therefore, Jnana Yoga becomes difficult. Okay. Then what is the process? Okay, so he's able to meditate on the super soul. But then there's another problem. The other problem is, if we have to accept the process of Dhyana Yoga as to just meditation, or just Dhyana Yoga, the way Dhyana Yoga works, which is what Patanjali emphasizes, is actually you're supposed to renounce, go to the forest. Because how can you meditate? How can you meditate on the super soul? You have to cut out distractions. But how can you not have distractions in the city? You just have so many obligations. The very house that you live in, you got to pay rent, you got to pay property tax. If you own it, you got to pay property. There's so many things. You can't just sit and just meditate. You can't do that. So you got to go to the forest and just eat on roots and fruits and things like that, where you don't. Because if you're interested in having burgers, then you got to pay for it and you got to work for it. And besides, if you eat burger, you can't meditate because it's not the type of food stuff that's going to calm your mind down. There's specific foodstuffs that basically reduce the pangs. For instance, if somebody eats something too spicy, or eats something too sour, eats something too pungent, eats something too salty, this also affects his mind. There's the saying, you are what you eat, right? So so the idea that Ashtanga yogis have is that if you go to the forest, you eat very, very simple things. Ultimately, many of them just try to subsist by eating hardly anything and drinking a lot of water. Yeah, and there are yogis who perfect like this. Some of them are still there around. But how many of us can do this? How many of us can do this? In fact, Arjuna, in the next chapter, that's what he says. He says to Krishna, this process you're telling, I don't think I can do it. It's not practical. It's like the mind, he says the mind is more difficult to control than the wind. But what Arjuna misses is the fact that actually in the conclusion of every chapter, Krishna is actually emphasizing devotional service. He is teaching all these different characteristics of yoga to emphasize how they are actually found in devotional service. For instance, how do we devotees, how do we meditate? We meditate upon the Hare Krishna mantra. But to do this meditation, you don't have to go to the cave. One can remain in any situation that one is in. But one can take to some of the advantages that are mentioned, that some of the characteristics of meditation, meaning, for instance, in Dhyana Yoga, it's said that one should not eat too much, one should not eat too little. One should not sleep too much, one should not sleep too little. If you don't regulate yourself, if you cannot balance yourself, then you cannot meditate. Then you cannot focus, you cannot concentrate. So that aspect is taken in Bhakti Yoga. Okay, we also sleep, but we don't sleep too much. And we don't sleep too little. We also eat only Krishna Prasadam. We eat that which is offerable to Krishna. We don't eat meat, eggs, fish, we don't eat all these gross things. We eat only that which is sattvic, that which is full of, we have grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk products, and we prepare them in a very nice way, and that's our Sunday feast. And then we eat this prasadam. And in that way our mind becomes imbued with Krishna consciousness. Okay, knowledge. Well, yes, we also have knowledge. That's why we're discussing Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, everything is explained. In Bhakti Yoga, this knowledge is derived. Why? So that we understand why we're doing what we're doing. Why do we have to chant Hare Krishna? Why do I have to do anything? Why do I have to do anything spiritual? No, we have this discussion. So that aspect of Jnana Yoga is found. And then Karma Yoga. What is Karma Yoga? Karma Yoga basically speaks about achieving liberation by performing the occupational duty that is according to one's nature. We all have different natures. We all have different abilities. We all have different talents. These talents can be engaged in Krishna service in the form of devotional service. Or one is doing different activities to maintain oneself. Provide for oneself. We all need to engage in different activities to keep our body and soul together, to feed ourselves, to keep some shelter on top of our head. All this can be engaged in devotional service. This can also become devotional service. Why? How can that happen? If our life is not meant for sense gratification, but if the purpose of our life is ultimately to achieve Krishna consciousness, if the purpose of our life is to achieve spiritual perfection, if the purpose of our life is to become a devotee of Krishna, then our maintenance of our body and soul, our occupation becomes a devotional service. It becomes a service unto Krishna. It's not for our personal, sense gratification or personal aggrandizement that we are living our lives. So this is how Bhakti Yoga, covers everything. And this is how Bhagavad Gita takes it. So now we are discussing chapter 5, verse 25. Okay. You all can please repeat. We'd like to chant the Sanskrit. It's very beautiful. Labhante Brahma Nirvanam. Labhante Brahma Nirvanam. Rishaya Kshina Kalmashaha. Rishaya Kshina Kalmashaha. Chinnadvaidayatatmana. Chinnadvaidayatatmana. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. Labhante Brahma Nirvanam. Rishaya Kshina Kalmashaha. Chinnadvaidayatatmana. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. Please repeat. Labhante brahma nirvanam. Vishayakshina kalmashaha. Chinnadvaidayatatmana. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. Labhante brahma nirvanam. Rishayakshina kalmashaha. Chinnadvaidhayat atmana. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. One more person. Anybody would like to try? Labhante brahma nirvanam. Rishayakshina kalmashaha. Chinnadvaidhayat atmana. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. Okay. Word to word translation. Labhante, achieve. Brahma nirvanam, liberation in the Supreme. Rishayaha, those who are active within. Kshina kalmashaha, who are devoid of all sins. Chinna, having torn off. Dvaidhaha, duality. Yata atmanaha, engaged in self-realization. Sarvabhuta, for all living entities. Hite, in welfare work. Rataha, engaged. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Purport. Only a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness can be said to be engaged in welfare work for all living entities. When a person is actually in the knowledge that Krishna is the fountainhead of everything, then when he acts in that spirit, he acts for everyone. The sufferings of humanity are due to forgetfulness of Krishna as the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend. Therefore, to act to revive this consciousness within the entire human society is the highest welfare work. One cannot be engaged in such first-class welfare work without being liberated in the Supreme. A Krishna-conscious person has no doubt about the supremacy of Krishna. He has no doubt because he is completely freed from all sins. This is the state of divine love. A person engaged only in ministering to the physical welfare of the human society cannot factually help anyone. Temporary relief of the external body and the mind is not satisfactory. The real cause of one's difficulties in the hard struggle for life may be found in one's forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. When a man is fully conscious of his relationship with Krishna, he is actually a liberated soul, although he may be in the material tabernacle. So, Krishna is continuing to describe the characteristics of one who is actually in knowledge. The person in knowledge acts. There is no use to knowledge if one cannot put it into action. If one cannot put knowledge into action, then that knowledge is practically useless. It is simply dry philosophy. And dry philosophy leads to misery, not to happiness. People will come up with different theories. So many people, you go to the street, everybody has their own philosophy. They all have their philosophy. But all these philosophies do not bring about the ultimate welfare that is needed for society at large. The ultimate welfare that is needed for society at large, one of the things that is needed is peace. Is it not? We all need peace. There's need of peace in human society, and different people have come up with different solutions. The United Nations was created for that purpose, right? But didn't really achieve that. Not at all, actually. In fact, the United Nations has its own army force that also needs to engage in violence for the sake of establishing peace, which didn't happen. So the problem is that those who are without knowledge, or those who have simply theoretical knowledge, not perfect knowledge, knowledge which isn't complete, then that knowledge does not transform into action. And when knowledge is transformed into action, then there is a characteristic of that knowledge. See, we all want to, if we all desire self-realization, we should know where to receive it from. A person who is self-realized can impart that knowledge onto us. Krishna has spoken about that in chapter 4. He speaks about that. He says, oh Arjuna, how do you achieve knowledge? How do you achieve transcendental knowledge? You go to someone who has transcendental knowledge. He can impart the truth unto you because he has seen it. He has already observed the truth. Therefore, he knows it. He can impart it unto you. But we have to understand the characteristics of such a person. So this is one of the characteristics that's described. That those who are beyond dualities that arise from doubts. You see, doubts give rise to dualities. What are dualities? Dualities refer to pain and pleasure, happiness, distress. These are called these are dualities that sometimes we feel enthusiastic, sometimes we feel uninspired. We just like no inspiration. And so we're caught between these opposites that our mind takes us, and what it does is it's like sometimes you feel like you're the ball in a ping pong match. It's like your mind is just going from one direction to another, and you're just like, and it's really, really difficult. And the nature of this material world is that it does that to us. It's like a roller coaster ride, but it's not fun because you don't know when it's going to end. If you're on a roller coaster ride and if it's going to end, then it's okay. But you don't know when it's going to end. It's just going on and on and on. And then it's not fun anymore. It's like, hey, I'm done with this. But this duality that arises, it comes from doubt. It comes from a lack of knowledge. It comes from a lack of knowledge as to understanding who we are, what is the nature of this world, who is supreme, who is actually in control. This knowledge is lacking. And when one achieves this knowledge, one arises above doubts. One is not conflicted by these doubts. Doubts arise from ignorance. Ignorance leads to the conditioning of the living entity. This ignorance binds us in this world. This ignorance is what causes us to be born again and again. The only reason that we talk of the cycle of birth and death, but actually the cycle of birth and death happens because the living entity has unfulfilled material desires. And to experience, these unfulfilled, to fulfill these unfulfilled material desires, this pure spirit soul has to accept a material body to engage in the futile work of trying to derive happiness from matter, which is temporary and therefore doesn't satisfy the soul. So then he goes on to the next thing, the next thing in life, And so people move like this in their personal lives. Society moves from one thing to another thing. Oh, this is the next thing, and then everybody's to it. Everybody goes to that. And then they get sick of it, and then everybody goes to the next thing. So a person who's actually in transcendental knowledge, he doesn't go through that. He's fixed. He cannot be swayed by temptations. Whose minds are engaged within. Means minds are engaged within, meaning that his mind is no longer diverted by sense gratification, meaning that he is determined to be on the path of Krishna consciousness, on the path of liberation, on the path of self-realization, and that path is to actually connect with one's eternal nature, which is being a servant of Krishna, meaning that we are part and parcel of God, we are small spirit sparks, and the person whose minds are engaged within, meaning his minds are not engaged in chasing, because the senses come in contact with the sense objects. The eye sees something beautiful, and then it takes the mind there. The nose smells something, immediately the mind goes there. A person who is in Krishna consciousness, who is in transcendental knowledge, his mind won't go. It doesn't mean his nose won't work. It doesn't mean his eyes cannot identify something that is beautiful. It doesn't mean that his nose cannot identify something that smells nice. It doesn't mean he is dead externally. But what it means is that they do not influence his state of consciousness. They do not influence his desires. So, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living entities. So this is another point, that sometimes when this word is used, they engage their minds within, it gives the impression of somebody who's just meditating and doing nothing. Right? That's the impression that one gets. Oh, they're doing nothing. They just meditate. That's all. But that's not true. One who is connected to his eternal spiritual nature sees that eternal spiritual nature in each and every living being. He sees, therefore he does not distinguish between different races, different castes, different people who are rich, who are poor, who are, he doesn't distinguish between animals. It's not that, he thinks that animals, because for instance, the whole meat industry is based upon this misconception that animals are meant for our exploitation. That animals are simply meant for us to eat. Why? Well, at least previously people used to say, because God gave dominion over animals. Dominion means, it doesn't mean that one just exploits, grows them up, exploits, tortures them, kills them. When they have placed faith, they've placed their life in the hands of those who are caring for such animals, and you just go and butcher them. This is not dominion. Dominion means to protect. It actually means to not exploit nature in a manner that so many species are suffering and dying because of our selfish desires. Dominion means to protect this earth and to protect the animals as all children of God. As viewing all of this as in connection with God, that Supreme who is sustaining us as well. This is the view that we should have. The dominion so yes, okay, the government has dominion over its citizens, go and kill everyone. Is that what it's meant for? There are governments like this, by the way, in the world, which just view its citizens as just those people who are just meant to prop up the establishment. That's not what dominion is meant for. So those who are actually in transcendental knowledge, they are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings. Why? Because that is their perception of the world. This was also described previously. It was described that what is that? Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavi hastini suni chaiva swapakecha pandita samadarshinaha. So what verses number is that? 5:19. So 19th verse of this chapter speaks that one who is in knowledge, one who is imbued with knowledge, he sees what is that? Vidya vinaya brahmane, he sees a learned man. Brahmane, gavi, he sees elephant, no, Gavi Hastini, yeah. Hastini refers to an elephant. He sees an elephant. He sees a cow. He sees he sees a dog, and he sees a dog eater, all on the same platform. He sees them all. Why? Because he sees that they are all actually spiritual sparks covered by this body. So therefore, because that is his perception of everything in this world, he acts in that platform. He does not think of exploiting other people. His engagement with them, that doesn't mean he's going to, carry placards and tell everybody, listen, if you don't become spiritual, you're all going to hell. Not like that. Not that he's trying to shove things down their throat. He doesn't try, but he acts, he doesn't, at the minimal, he's not trying to exploit them. And he's trying to think, he's engaged in welfare activities, which Srila Prabhupada describes here in this purport, that Only a fully Krishna conscious person can do that because he is interested in giving Krishna consciousness to others. So, therefore, giving this transcendental knowledge to others, enabling them to receive this transcendental knowledge is the highest welfare activity. Because we can give people, we can open many organizations and try to feed people, give them clothing, give them shelter, disaster relief, and all these things. Now, does that mean that these things should not exist? No, we are not advocating that there should be, that nobody should feed a hungry person, nobody should feed people who are in need of disaster relief. That's not what we're advocating. But what we are trying to say is that while those things may be required at a particular time, place, and circumstance, if one does not give transcendental knowledge, if one does not give knowledge of the self, then those things are bound to happen again. Why? That is the nature of this world. That is the nature of this world. It's the nature of this. Today you may feed somebody, tomorrow who is going to give them food? And then, okay, you may be able to sponsor someone for their whole life. What about their next life? Can you take care of that as well? No. So there are limitations to serving the material body. There is a place for everything in society. But if the center is not Krishna consciousness, if the center is not Krishna, then ultimately it doesn't satisfy the spirit soul. Ultimately it remains temporary. So the person who is in knowledge, he is busy, engaged in giving that knowledge. He is giving Krishna consciousness to others. Such a person is Srila Prabhupada. He gave his life for that. He gave us these books. And we are trying to follow in his footsteps by distributing these books. We also try to form other things. For instance, in part of this renovation of this facility is to have a restaurant here. Why are we interested in making money? We're interested in having a business. That's not the point. The point is to promote this spiritual, very tasty and healthy food that is a much better alternative to eating these gross things that people eat outside, which are things that actually are meant to go into a graveyard. Instead of going to a graveyard, people are putting it in their stomach. And then it causes disturbance in their mind, and then they wonder why they're mentally disturbed. It's because that which is supposed to go to a graveyard is going into your stomach. There's very serious problem. Then there's no question of peace. The very thing that you're eating, the very act of eating, you have destroyed the notion of peace. Because that animal didn't experience peace when it was killed. It didn't want to be killed. But we killed it. So, the restaurant is meant to promote that. Because some people, they're not going to be directly interested in the knowledge. But if they were to adopt a lifestyle where they were to become attached to this kind of a food, then also they will become benefited. And some of them, after eating that food for some time, will think, well, this food is really tasty. What's the philosophy behind these people? And then they will come to Krishna consciousness. No? We also, for instance, another thing that we'll be doing here is we'll be growing some food. We can't grow a lot of food, but we have a good plot of land in the back. We'll be growing some vegetables and some fruits and some things like that. We believe in that. We very much believe in the idea of growing your own food. So some people may become attracted to that. Yes, I also like gardening. I also want to grow. I think, food self-sufficiency is a very important thing in this world. Yes, it's important. But after that, you have to become Krishna conscious. After we fill our belly, we have to become Krishna conscious. Because after filling our belly, if we are engaged in exploitation of other living entities, then what is the point? Then there cannot be any peace. So in this way, and how do we know about all these things? By Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Srila Prabhupada has given us these things in his books. And therefore, this process of Krishna consciousness, you will find, for instance, the Dhyana Yogi, the Ashtanga Yogi, those who are following Patanjali Yoga, they are not going to open restaurants. Why? Because what has it got to do with meditation? It's got nothing to do with that. But Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, involves all of these things. And what's even better, if somebody is like has a little bit of an entrepreneurial, ability, they can run the restaurant. And it's like a business, is it not? But that business is not conducted for one selfish aggrandizement. And even if somebody is conducting some other business, as long as it's non-violent, there is nothing wrong. As long as one personally is trying to become Krishna conscious, and as far as possible offering the fruits, supporting the spreading of this knowledge, supporting the welfare, supporting the spreading of Krishna consciousness, either through donations, which is mostly how it will have to be done, because the fruit of most of labor is money. So that's where, time is equal to money. When you want something to get done fast, pay. That's the only way you're going to get it done fast. Otherwise, how are you going to get it done fast? Time equals money. So, therefore, people who because of their occupational duties, because of their different obligations, are unable to spend time like trying to go out there and give this knowledge to others, they can give donations, and in this way they can support the Krishna consciousness movement. They can support the spreading and giving this knowledge to others. They can also volunteer to do different things, which is also welcome. And that is where one develops that higher taste. And this is very important, because unless we actually practically engage in Krishna consciousness, we may read, we may chant, but we have to perform service. We have to perform devotional service. Without performing service, without engaging in that selfless act, right? One cannot achieve happiness. That higher taste will not come. You will read the books, you will understand, yes, we have to chant Hare Krishna, yes, but we'll still be going back to our old habits. We'll still be going back to our old, We have to engage in active service. This facility has been created for that purpose. There are many services that one can do here. Ask us, we'll tell you. And of course, once we renovate, the whole board of list of voluntary services that one can do. This is why we're trying to renovate this place, to give service opportunity. As monks, actually this is a burden. It's like we could be living, some of us, actually in a van. Why even a apartment, but you just live in a van. You just go around, distribute books, as long as you're able to have like a small stove and you can cook something, that's it. You don't have to pay much. You can live happily, because monks, right? And we do have a traveling, Sankirtan party that goes around, and this is what they do. They live in the van. Build out a van, and it's a really carefree life. It's wonderful. You're giving your time. You're spreading Krishna consciousness. You're getting to go and see different places. You're getting to meet new people, and you're giving them this transcendental knowledge. And you're moving from town to town. You're like, it's blissful. But there's this big facility with all this granite and all this this huge facility here. Even mowing the lawn is like, man, you mow the lawn. If you're in the van, you don't have to mow any lawn. It's like, and there's a big lawn here. We have to get the lawnmower. You have to buy that lawnmower. You got to pay for it. You have to maintain it. So it's all expense. But the idea is to create facility for service, to give that opportunity to perform that selfless service to Krishna, related to Krishna consciousness, to create that facility. That is why we are renovating this church and turning it into. We have a long way to go. We're getting a big loan soon. So we need all of your help. Give donations. Hare Krishna. So anyways, but the point is that this is the reason why we're creating all this facility. Why create all this unnecessary expense? It's a burden for us also. The reason is we need to create this facility. We need to accept this. We need to do this for the welfare of everybody. Because there's so many people who have different, they're not all going to come to Krishna consciousness in the same way. But we need to try to figure out ways in which we can benefit everybody. And that requires time, effort, manpower, and money. So who are free from all sins achieve liberation in the Supreme. So those who are Krishna conscious, they're automatically free from all sins. Because they are freed from the desire to commit sinful activities. So they automatically become freed from all sins. They automatically become sinless. Being sinless is like, it's like a byproduct of being Krishna conscious. Therefore, they achieve liberation. So this is a this is a very nice verse. So text 26. Kama krodha vimuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So this is all ultimately achieving the eternal peace, which is achieving liberation. So Avadhuta Chandra Prabhu isn't here. But anyways, oh, there you are. See here, in a previous class, you were asking Yati Dharma. Yeah, but actually, from this verse, you can understand that Yati refers to also saintly people. So Yati Dharma refers to Sadhu Dharma. So yeah, that's anyways, side point. Okay, translation, purport. Of the saintly people, Yatinam, who are constantly engaged in striving towards salvation, one who is in Krishna consciousness is the best of all. The Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, Text 39, confirms this fact as follows. Yadpada pankaja palasa vilasa bhaktya karmashayam gratitham udgratayanti santaha tadvannariktamatayo yatayopi ruddha Shrotro ganastamananam bhajam vasudevam. Just try to worship in devotional service Vasudev, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. Beautiful verse, very beautiful verse. By surrendering, by serving the lotus feet of Vasudeva, by serving the lotus feet of Krishna, we uproot that deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. We're all chasing after different fruits. That's what it's called, fruits. Why fruits? Because when you buy a pack of blueberries, some of the blueberries are sweet, some of them are sour. And when it's sour, it doesn't taste good. It's not as relishable. Sometimes you might buy different fruits. So you buy a mango. When the mango is really sweet, it's like you went to, there's nothing better in the world than this mango. It's like, wow. But then when you get a mango sometimes that mango doesn't have any taste also. It's like you just feel like you're just eating some, I don't know, like some whatever, some cream, just like something. It just feels like you're eating like sand or something. It's just like there's no taste to it. So this is the nature of fruits. If you go to a tree, some fruits are good, some fruits are not good. When we went to Miami, the first time we went to Miami, we got all excited looking at the coconut trees. So, so there was one particular place where the coconuts had fallen on the ground. And we were like, wow, you see these coconuts are on the ground, we could take them. And we shook them, they had some coconut water in it. Little did we know that the coconut that had fallen on the ground is actually, it's spoiled. It's gone bad already. We took that, it tasted like the worst thing you could ever imagine. It was so horrible. And we were thinking we're going to enjoy this coconut water. And he was like, wow, it's like, this disgusting thing. And then you're like, you're taking water, like, rinsing your mouth 4 or 5 times to try to get rid of that lingering horrible taste. You can't even describe that taste. It wasn't sour. It was like something weird. It was just so like, astringent, and just like, burned your tongue, and it was really bad. So this example can be understood of how sometimes, we're like, like all flowery, all dreamy and this and that, and we taste that fruit and then we become so disappointed. So this deep-grown desire to enjoy the fruits, that gets uprooted. How? Even great sages are not able to do that. Even great sages are not able to do that as effectively as somebody who is engaged in the transcendental bliss of Krishna consciousness. This transcendental bliss of Krishna consciousness is an amazing process. And therefore, association of devotees, because in the association of devotees we engage in that service. Now, so we have to do this. We have to do this because this is what we are seeking for. We're seeking this happiness. And what do we need to do? We need to chant Hare Krishna. We need to read these books. We need to associate with devotees. Come here and do some service. Engage in some service. You will feel that blissful activity. And then, take prasadam. Take prasadam. Help us cook this prasadam. Help us prepare it, because we need help. We need to cut up. We need a lot of help to do this. It's a big effort. Okay, Prabhupada continues. In the conditioned soul, the desire to enjoy fruitive results of work is so deep-rooted that it is very difficult even for the great sages to control such desires despite great endeavors. A devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme. Owing to his complete knowledge and self-realization, he always remains in trance. He remains in trance. He's in bliss. This is samadhi. This is the ultimate peace. To cite an analogous example of this, Darshana dhyana samsparshair matsyakurma vihangamaha swanyan swanyapatyani pushnanti tataham api padmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offspring. Similarly, do I also, O Padmaja. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly, by engagement in Krishna consciousness. He does not feel the pangs of material misery. This state of life is called Brahma Nirvana, or the absence of material miseries, due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. So I could not finish the chapter. There's still 3 more verses, and the purports are long, yeah. So I will stop here. Hopefully next class we would conclude chapter 5. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Any questions? Yes, Mataji. Excuse me.
Earlier in the class, you mentioned about anything that has a beginning, like its temporariness. But it made me think about, if we're souls and we're eternal, and Krishna is limitless, then it seems that if souls aren't created nor destroyed, then is there a set number of souls that exist? And then if that's the case, then does that, it seems kind of limiting to Krishna. So I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around it.
Yeah, Krishna is unlimited, so there are unlimited souls. There's just unlimited, countless number of living entities. It's impossible to count. It's not possible, because Krishna is unlimited. That's one of his characteristics as the Supreme. He's unlimited. Although he has a form, he's also unlimited. This is his inconceivable nature. So there are unlimited spiritual living entities. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other doubts? Anything else? I have. Thank you. I have my beads. You have the mic. Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. So we will now chant Hare Krishna. We want to teach. We do this every Sunday. So now we will show you all how to chant Hare Krishna. This is the best form of self-realization that one can practice. It's very simple, it doesn't cost anything, and it gives the highest bliss. So, this mantra that's behind me over here is called the Hare Krishna mantra. What is mantra? Mantrayateti mantraha. That which delivers the mind is called mantra. And in mantra meditation, one meditates on the sound vibration. You meditate on the sound vibration, you vibrate your tongue, and you meditate on that sound. We don't have to think of anything complex or anything like that. In fact, all we need to do is we need to stop thinking about everything else and just focus on the sound vibration. Now, the sound vibration is something that is easy also to focus compared to focusing on something that is an image that is created by the mind. The sound vibration is a lot easier to focus. So this, by focusing on the sound vibration, one delivers the mind, one purifies the mind, and ultimately one's consciousness becomes imbued with Krishna, because these holy names are non-different from Krishna himself. By chanting these holy names, we associate with Krishna. We become connected. This is yoga. You become connected with the Supreme. You become connected with Krishna. So, this Hare Krishna mantra, so you all can please repeat after me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's very, very simple. It's a very simple process. Now, how do you hold your beads? What we chanted right now is called one mantra. So all your beads have this, what we call as the head bead. The head bead is the bead that has these strings sticking out of it. So you would hold on to the bead right after the head bead. Not the head bead itself, but you would hold the bead after the head bead. That is called the first bead. And like this, a mala, a string of beads, contain 108 beads. There are 108 beads. There's multiple reasons why there are 108 beads. But for now, there are 108 beads. So one round, one mala of the Hare Krishna mantra means to chant 108 times. That means to chant 108 times, means you chant on each bead. So we chant one full mantra on one bead, and then you would pull the bead into your, you would move on to the next bead by pulling the beads in. And then you would go to the second bead, and you would again chant the full mantra, then you will move on to the next bead. Traditionally, the beads are held with the thumb and the middle finger. And the forefinger is left free. This is traditional. There are reasons for that, but for now, this is what is traditionally done. So if you can do that, great. Otherwise, the main important point is to chant one full mantra on one bead and move on to the next bead. Okay? So now we will chant all together. We will chant 10 beads like this, and then we will stop. That is just a trial session. I encourage all of you to go back home to try chanting these. If you aren't chanting right now, then please chant every day. Chant at least 108 times. Finish one full mala. It will only take 10 minutes. Right? And if you already chant, then chant more. So, yes?
Does it make a difference which hand is used?
Sorry?
Does it make a difference which hand?
Again, traditionally, the right hand is used, but the important point right now is to chant. And to count. Why do you have to count? Why can't I just chant? Why count? Why use beads? Because when we count, when we measure something, then it will increase. We can quantify our practice, and we can increase that practice. Just like if you don't know how much is in your bank account, you can keep spending, and then suddenly you'll run out of money. But when you know how much, you start quantifying, then things start to make a lot more sense. And then when you quantify, then there becomes a desire to increase. So, okay, so the count of 3, 2, 1, let's get into it. 3, 2, 1. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Last time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's very simple. It's very easy. It doesn't cost anything. It takes 10 minutes out of your life to chant one full mantra, one full round of these mantras. But the benefit is great.